right. Happy New Year, Paul. It's a little late for Happy New Year, but we haven't been able to do a video since the end of last year. We said that we would be back in January, but we didn't quite make it. So now it's February. So welcome back. How have you been?
Yeah, I've been great. Happy New Year. It's never too late to start over.
No, never too late to start over. So when we were meeting last year, we had gotten talking about different topics. We talked about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We talked about Donald Trump winning the election. What else did we talk about? We had another topic too, didn't we?
We had talked about the woke. Actually, it was
the woke, yeah.
Major
So, speaking of the woke doesn't seem to be in favor anymore in the U.S.
Yeah.
So, with Donald Trump coming into power in January. Maybe one of the things I wanted to talk about, Paul, was maybe how people in Uganda, or how you maybe even perceive what's happening in the U.S., because I know that even though it's what's happening in the U.S., the world is taking a lot of notice of what's happening right now. Some of which I personally agree with, and some of which I don't agree with. We've talked a lot about the woke stuff, and Donald Trump's done a lot to challenge some of the woke things. I think you sent me a video in which some news people were talking about some of the LGBTQ or some of the woke programs that were being funded all around the world by
USAID?
Yes, by US. Yep. Mm-hmm. And one of them was $4 million for an LGBTQ rights group in Uganda. I'd like to get your take on that. Like, what's your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah. Thank you. But before I even get there, Donald Trump is a bit of a divisive figure, in the sense that in the polarized political world that we're in, where if you support, let's say, Donald Trump, then people will hold you accountable for even his misdeeds. But sometimes, like when the Pope was quizzed about who he would support for president between Kamala and Trump, he said, "You choose the lesser evil," something like that.
Yeah.
So as much as Donald Trump is not lawless person, I vouched for him to become the president, much as my opinion may not really matter. But I would rather have seen Donald Trump come in because of the few things that I think. Because America is such a superpower in the sense that whatever happens in the US, one way or the other influences what happens to me here in Uganda. So, to me, it was a win when he came in. I know there are times.
Well, let me ask you this question. What do you think impact that? Like, when you say what happens in the U.S. impacts you in Uganda, what sort of impact do you think that this is going to have, or maybe is having, on you or on the people of Uganda?
Well, Uganda relies on the Western world for a lot of funding, especially our budget. Almost close to a half of our budget is funded by countries abroad, and this funding comes with strings attached, one way or the other. Okay, some of the strings attached are written, some others are not written, others are subtle strings attached, and we've been struggling with, more especially, the woke people who have been in power for the last 4 years, and those strings that have been attached from the government that just left were not favorable for most of us, the Ugandans, the average Ugandan, because the people at the top maybe they don't matter much. They get the money, but for the average person, there are things that are being pushed up our throat, or we have to take them in whether we like it or not. Things like the LGBTQ and DEI things. They're influencing how policy works here. a few years back, I was lamenting among my colleagues why employment is hard in non-profit non-profits where you go and apply for a job. They would rather prefer to employ a female than a male. It's not a meritocracy. It's more about inclusion, and that is something that is more woke or more leftist. And for me, as someone who was affected by it directly, I would rather have seen a change, and maybe Donald Trump offers that change. Where okay, I
Hmm.
think one of the first things they threw out, the first executive order was to do away with the DI things.
Do you think that it's difficult for you or for a male to get a job, say, in a nonprofit in Uganda?
I may not speak for everyone, but I've been there. There's a time I had a few interviews, a couple of interviews, and I was not going through. And I would reach out to get feedback why I didn't go through. And the reason, overwhelming reason, was always that we just prefer to have a female. We just prefer to have a female. So it wasn't
Hmm.
like I was beaten on merit, but rather I was beaten based on my gender. And that really hurt a lot. It left a
Hmm.
bitter taste in my tongue. Like, why would I be rejected for employment because I'm a man? I won't go to the details beyond that, but having a government that is not going to push such ideologies, down my throat, it's a good relief. A good relief. Much as there are also other evils that come, I think Elon Musk is too radical. I think it's too radical.
Do you
Some
want
of
to
the things.
expand on that? Like, what is it about? I mean, what are the things that concern you about Elon Musk?
Um, I guess I'll get to it later. Um, but from a few commentaries that I've been seeing, he's much of a more radical person. I think there's a time I was reading a comment by Donald Trump where he says he does not necessarily agree with everything Elon says. Sometimes they disagree on things,
Hmm.
and to me, it was certainly showing where um, their ideas that Elon is trying to bring up here, which may not be helpful to the greater
Hmm.
good of everyone. Um, he's into our face. I like some of the things he does. You know, I'm not so certain of him.
Hmm. I
Yeah.
don't know if you saw you heard about the kind of when Elon Musk raised his hand and was throwing his heart out to people, and the people on the left picked up on that as being some sort of Nazi salute, and they
No, I
ran with
saw
it.
that one.
Yeah, and it wasn't a Nazi salute, but when he
Yeah,
raised his hand, people are saying, "Oh, that's a Nazi salute."
yeah, but what I'm saying is that we've been held hostage by the work that we have been working on eggshells. You're afraid to talk about certain things. You're afraid to talk about Israel. You're afraid to say anything positive about Germany. You're afraid because if you say you're supporting Palestinian people, you're anti-Semitic. Those things. So um, I can't be one of the people who looks at what is a sign someone has done and they start saying that they mean this. What if they don't mean that? What if they mean something else? So I don't look at those small things, those subtle things. I may say small and people will come at me, but to me, that I rather listen to what someone has said, the
Hmm.
content that they've said, or the actions that they've done, way beyond the simple symbolism that okay, this person they cover their eye like this, that means Illuminati. I don't believe in those
Yeah.
things. I rather their actions, the words they say, because I can hold them accountable. Because these signs that we're seeing people doing, they are very subjective. We, we can
Hmm.
always think what we want, and they can always have his defense. Yeah, but anyhow, you asked how the US affects us. I've given you one reason is that we get funding from the US. So if whatever policies that the US prioritizes, you as someone who is a beneficiary from their money,
Hmm.
you are kind of forced to prioritize the same things that they prioritize. You can look at our government. All the positions below the president, the next 5, 7 to 10 positions are filled by women. You can't tell me that's a coincidence. You know, the vice president is a woman, the speaker of parliament is a woman, the prime ministers, all of the like three prime ministers, I think they're all women. Minister of the, like, it's too many women in the cabinet. Is it that men are now incompetent?
Mm.
I don't think so.
Mm.
And when you go to the schools, the schools, I think I talked about it in one of our all the videos. When you go to schools, in the higher institutions of learning, um, bachelors, masters, PhD candidates, you're going to find that we have more females um, graduating than males. Males are dropping out, and so we can't just sit back and say American policies do not affect us. They do.
Yeah.
They do. If America is prioritizing um, inclusion and is putting it in our face, and other people are being left behind. And
So yeah, and,
unfortunately,
you're not saying, of course, we've talked about this before though, but you're not saying that women are now qualified to do these positions.
so what I'm saying, currently my boss is a female, and she's a very competent boss. Very competent. I'm under her tutelage. I benefit a lot from her, and I have no qualms about her being my boss because she's good. She knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
But I've been in places where people are getting positions just because they are female, where you even have candidates who have better qualifications, who have better CVs, who are just better. To the point that even some of the females, one female I did an interview with sometimes said that when she came and she found some of the people who had come for the interview, she wanted to walk away. But then she got the job, and after she got the job, she kept calling us, "Hey, you guys, she, like sort of apologizing. Like, why was she apologizing? She didn't do anything wrong." But they gave her the job, and she said they told her they prefer to have a woman. But that's where the world had gone with the DEI. It was very bad, very intense. That the meritocracy had been, stepped on, had been suffocated. That we can't get work done on merit. Rather, just be a female. No one, and in a way, I feel that's how they are promoting the LGBTQ things of trying to be transgender. So if the prospect of being a female comes with more opportunities, then I can as well just wake up one morning and feel like being a woman. There's a picture that has been moving around Uganda. There's a policeman. He was a policeman here, and our policemen, most of them, they are not rich. They are poor people. So he wanted better opportunities, and he's not the only one. Most Ugandans who want to go abroad and get citizenship and asylum, they used to go under the disguise of being gay. I'm being persecuted because I'm being gay. They will go in that they will join that group, and they would go as though they are gay, but actually these people, some of them are not even gay. They just disguise to go
Yeah,
out.
they're not actually gay, is what you're saying.
Yeah, so they just want to get out and get opportunities. But the picture which has been circulating of this man, he used to be a normal guy, he had a family, and now he went to Australia with a policeman. Now he's a woman in Australia, he has transitioned. People Ugandans are not happy about such pictures circulating here.
Mm-hmm.
But people are doing it because it proved an easier path to success financially. It was more viable, and that's pernicious. I just can't celebrate enough that we have someone at the top that side that is just anti these things, because I know we won't have as much pressure down here.
Well, he has reversed the trans women competing in women's sports. We've talked about that before, and how that was a big controversy because there were men who transitioned and they were wanting to compete with women, and they were winning and breaking records, and women just simply couldn't compete with them, obviously because they're biological males. So now Trump has signed an executive order banning that sort of thing, and as a result, you're seeing all over the country now people beginning to rise up now and saying that we don't want this. And in fact, I've seen one poll that indicates that over 80% of Americans are opposed to those who are biological males but identify as women competing with women. So the vast majority of the people in America are actually opposed to that. But now that it's becoming kind of cool to say that, I guess. More people are speaking up, and you're hearing people be a lot more vocal and take more public stands about this.
Last year when we had this conversation, I remember saying the election it was not mainly about, it wasn't really about money, finances of the country or economy or fiscal policy or whatever. To me, the American population was battling with, the moral ideologies. I think that I think the election was won on morals or on common sense.
Economically, life is getting increasingly harder in the United States. And I know, for example, to buy a dozen eggs can cost you $5, $6, $7, or $8. I mean, prices are really becoming outlandish. And living in Uganda for a year and a half and comparing what it costs to live in Uganda to what it costs to live in the U.S., things are a lot more livable. What is it? The cost of living is a lot lower. You need a lot less money to live in Uganda. Although the problem with Uganda is it's hard to actually make money. So you go to a job and you don't make all that much money. But if you have the money, Uganda is actually a better place to live because it's a better bargain for your money. But just seeing how Uganda hasn't really changed much since I came to Uganda in July 2023, hasn't really changed much in terms of how much things cost, but things have steadily become worse in the U.S. Things are getting more and more expensive. So I think people are concerned with economic impact. I think for a lot of people in America, it's getting harder. But I'm not denying the role. I'm not denying what you're saying either.
Because my point was, okay, of course, the economic situation is relevant because it's key. But I felt like at the point of election, people were just trying to push away the moral component that was going down, the moral drain. And, I feel like, because I watched a few debates of, the lay Americans online. And most debates, of course, there were those talking about the fiscal policy and, obviously, and it was almost a tie. But then the key things people are talking about were, being liberal and being woke.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that election felt like a woke lost.
Yeah, they definitely. The woke. I mean, I don't even know if I'm not even hearing the term woke much anymore, and I think that the people on the left have stopped using the term because they feel that the term has been hijacked by the people on the right, because they used to use the term, but now they don't, because conservatives have used the term to pretty much demonize anything on the far left or the progressive left, and so now the people on the left are no longer using the term woke for that reason. But I think they've definitely, at least for now, they've definitely lost the battle, or they're losing the battle. Whether or not they'll have a resurgence, I don't know. But right now, at least, they're definitely losing the battle in the U.S.
And if they lose the battle in the U.S., then the whole world will follow, I guess.
The whole world will follow, and I think it's going to.
Yeah. So, and that's a welcome problem. Yeah. So, but there's something about Trump that that I do not agree with. But I wonder if he's actually threatening to do it. So,
Gaza? You're talking about Gaza?
Yeah, Gaza. Let me just say something, okay? Like, I had someone trying to articulate it in a sympathetic tone to Trump. So the idea, so people are thinking, what if Trump is trying to come out so extreme, so that when they have negotiations and he lowers down, people still take, he comes off as a savior. So he'll come like, okay, we take over Gaza, we displace people into Egypt, and what etc. We make Gaza look like whatever place it is for tourism and what, so that to threaten the Hamas people to sort of fear, they get into some sort of fear, then they get on a negotiating table and they get lesser terms than they're actually wanting right now. Maybe that's what he's doing, because what is seemingly tabling is inachievable.
So yeah, thinking about what Trump has said, he kind of backed down a little bit on what he was saying, and he wasn't actually threatening to actually take over Gaza, or was he? I don't know. You know, Trump says a lot of things, but I've noticed that he sometimes will say things, you know, that sound pretty extreme, and that he backs off on it. It's because there's been several things, like, for example, when Trump froze all funding on federal programs. Now, when he did that, I got a little scared because my work as an evaluator, and I evaluate different science, mathematics, engineering, education projects, and so forth. Most of the clients that I work with, in fact, all of the clients that I work with, get funding from the United States federal government. So if you freeze that funding, you basically are putting me out of a job. So some of the stuff that Trump has been doing, you know, in a way, I guess it threatens my livelihood. And with all the cuts that he's making in the federal programs, there's a lot of people whose jobs are in danger. There's a lot of people who are losing their jobs. And it used to be in the U.S. that to work in a federal job or to get funding through projects that receive federal funding was pretty secure, because you know that money was going to continue to flow. It was going to keep coming. Now suddenly that's all different. You know, now suddenly I have to consider the possibility that, okay, right now the money's coming in because because he, after a couple of days, he backed off on that. And now the money's flowing again, but yet he's going through programs. And of course, understandably, he's looking to find out where there's wasteful spending, where there's woke programs and so forth. And he's eliminating those. But at the same time, I don't really know what's going to be on the chopping block eventually. And so I need to look into other possibilities in terms of work, just to give myself some security, because I can't trust in what I currently have. You know, that's one of the things I'm learning here, is that everything I have could be taken away just like that. And of course, that's true with life in general. You know, there's no guarantees in life, you know, but this is just an example of how, you know, Trump, you know, kind of shocked me, because I didn't really, I mean, I know he's a little extreme. We've talked about this. And in America, you kind of see this shift back and forth between the far right and the far left. I don't know if I want to say far right or far left, because I don't like those terms. Usually far right and far left are usually reserved for people that are so far on either side that they resort to violence. And I'm not, so I don't know if I want to use the term far right or far left, but you see America shifting back and forth between people who are very far to the left and people who are very far to the right. And each time you have a swing, it seems to get more and more. So for example, Bill Clinton was on the left, but then George W. Bush came into power and was more to the right than Clinton was to the left. And then after George Bush, because, you know, you had all that Iraq war stuff and so forth. Then after George Bush, you had Obama, who was more to the left than Clinton was, but he was more to the left than George W. Bush was to the right. Then Trump came in, who was more to the right, and then Biden came in, who was more to the left, and Trump's second term is even more to the right. So what you're seeing is this swing back and forth. It seems to be like very reactionary back and forth, but each time it swings, it gets more in the direction that it swings. If it goes right, it gets more to the right than it was before. If it goes to the left, it gets more to the left than it was before. And I don't know how far you can go to either the right or the left before you fall off the edge. You know?
I know.